Welcome to the Chess Angle. In this episode, I am going to discuss draw offers, slumps, and ego. So 3 interesting topics as they relate to chess tournaments, so stick around. Okay, so let's talk about the psychology of draw offers. Now, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to put on my tournament director hat and give a little bit of a public service announcement about the proper way to offer a draw. Because as a TD and a player, this is probably one of the most butchered and misunderstood rules in the entire rulebook. So let me explain the correct way to do it. But what's interesting, even if you don't offer a draw the correct way, it still counts. So let's go through it. The way to offer a draw is to first wait until it is your turn to move. So your clock should be running. Then what you're supposed to do is you make your move first, you offer the draw, and then you hit your clock. Okay, so I'm going to say that again. You make your move first, whatever it is, knight f3, rook c7 check. You say to your opponent, I offer a draw, and then you press your clock. At which point, your opponent has to make a decision. Now, denying the draw can be done more than one way. You can simply say, no, thank you, or I'm going to keep playing, something like that. I usually say, I'm going to keep going, and then we'll see. I'd rather than kind of just say no, just to kind of smooth it out. Or you can simply move a piece. Some people do that as kind of a competitive way to deny a draw offer by not saying anything and just moving. It's almost like showing you were annoyed with the draw offer. That's just my interpretation, but that's one thing you can do. You don't have to say anything. You could just move a piece, and that acts as a declination of the draw offer. But just remember, if you touch a piece, that also is a declination of the draw offer. Why? Because remember, touching a piece is a commitment to move, right? If you touch a piece, you have to move it. So you got to be careful. Let's say your opponent offers a draw, and you realize that was a mistake because he has a winning move that you can't prevent. If you touch the piece, you can't say, oh, wait a minute, you know what? I'm going to take that draw down. No. Once you touch the piece, you have to move. Now, you might get lucky and your opponent might say, fine, I'll take the draw if he doesn't see it. But just something to be aware of, which is why when you're offered a draw, if your opponent does not move first, you have the right to say and should say, make your move first and I'll consider it. And that's a very powerful thing because what might happen is, your opponent will move. He'll say, I offer a draw. Or he won't move, He won't move. He'll just say, I offer a draw. So if you say make your move first, if he realizes that he has a winning move, he can't take it back. Remember, draw offers are irrevocable. Okay? Now, if he checkmates you, that's different because checkmate takes precedence over everything. But I highly recommend if your opponent offers a draw, and you're not sure, say make your move first and I'll consider it, and he has to do that. Now, here's the other part of that rule. If at any time you offer a draw, even if you don't do it the correct way where you make your move, offer the draw, then hit your clock, if you just blurt out, I offer a draw, let's say your opponent's clock is running, it still counts. That's what makes it a weird rule. See, the rule book recommends to do it the way I recommended, but if you offer a draw incorrectly, it still counts. So just keep that in mind. Okay. So that was my public service announcement. Now, let's talk about draw offers at the amateur level. It's definitely an interesting discussion at all levels, but since this podcast is geared towards your typical average Joe player, let's talk about that. I believe that knowing when to accept or offer a draw can increase or at least preserve rating points. And that viewpoint has been backed up by titled players as well. Now, there are some who disagree with that, and we're going to talk about that. But from my own experience with my own games, and just based on anecdotal evidence from other games, I believe that to be important. I've lost so many rating points because I was stubborn. I declined a draw when I should have accepted. That's where the ego part of this episode comes in. And you have to be smart about it. Because what will happen is, and I've been in this position too many times, even recently, where your lower rated opponent is doing well, or maybe you're having a bad night, or it could be both. And he offers you a draw. And because of ego, you think, well, I'm supposed to win this game. I'm not going to accept a draw. And you think about the rating points. And then, you get into time pressure, or maybe the clock was already a problem. You decline the draw, and then you end up losing the game. And as a result, you lose a ton of rating points instead of just a small amount if you had just drawn the game. Okay. So it's something to think about. I believe you need to know when to offer or accept a draw. You need to go by the position, by your clock. You just can't go by your ego. Now, some disagree. Now, Jeremy Silman, I am International Master Jeremy Silman, who you guys know is my favorite as far as instructional material. He actually believes that you should not offer a draw at the amateur level. So I have to respectfully disagree with Mr. Silman there because, like I said, in my own experience, I think it causes a lot of problems. I think knowing when to offer or accept a draw can be very smart. As far as rating, okay, remember, I'm putting this into the context of increasing your rating. If it's just about just playing chess and all that and the love of the game, that whole thing, that's a different story. But as far as rating and rated tournaments, I believe, accepting or offering a draw is the right move. Okay. And I know I've messed that up many times and I continue to do so, even though I know, but that's where the ego comes in. We just want to believe that, we can pull the win out. So you really have to be smart. Now I'm going to read a passage from a book I'm going to talk about a little bit later. It's called The Survival Guide to Competitive Chess by John Ems. A little bit of a corny title. This was kind of an impulse buy a number of years ago at a bookstore. And it's similar to The Amateur's Mind in that it's about the mindset. It's not like, learn this end game, learn this opening. It's all about how to interpret the correct, plan of attack or, what you should do and your mindset, which I think is very important because a lot of us at the amateur level, we kind of know a lot of the theory, but the mindset doesn't line up with that. And that's why sometimes we have problems, winning games that we should have or with rating. But here's a passage from this book. I remember a well-known grandmaster once saying that knowing when to offer a draw is a skill that can add a significant number of points to your rating. Now, I certainly agree with that. Or if it doesn't add points to your rating, it'll at least prevent you from, losing points. Okay. So he continues to say, in fact, in certain cases, the player offering the draw is not happy at all with the thought of a draw. Grandmaster Nigel Davies has said that he's found draw offers to be of good practical value when his opponent has the better position but is not handling his clock too well. In this case, a draw offer is a way of asking if he wants to roll the dice, and thinking about this question, i.e. using more clock time, can tip the odds further against him should he decline. And then the author says that he certainly used this technique before, and I know countless others who have too. So you can offer a draw like strategically to get into your opponent's head. That's not, unsportsmanlike or anything. What would be unsportsmanlike is when you offer a draw in a position where you're clearly losing. Okay, that's, it's not explicitly forbidden, but it's considered poor etiquette. Now, what is explicitly forbidden and what is against the rules are repeated draw offers. Like, let's say you're completely losing and you keep saying, I offer a draw, I offer a draw. You can't do that. Okay. Because that's annoying your opponent, which is against the rules. Repeated draw offers like that are not allowed. Now, I'm not talking about if you offer a draw, your opponent declines, and then maybe 10 moves later. Okay. That's a different story. And the other thing I want to throw in here, because I love talking about draw offers. This is a fascinating topic for me. The other thing that I disagree with the notion that if you are the lower rated player, that it's improper to offer a draw. Okay, I've seen that in a lot of books and a lot of articles where, you're, say, a 1,500 player playing a 2,000 player. Well, it's improper etiquette to offer the higher rated player the draw. I think that's nonsense. For me, it goes by the position. Okay, so if I'm, say, 1,700 and I'm playing a 2,100 player and I'm doing well and we have like a very dead even end game, I am well within my rights to offer a draw. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It goes by the position. Okay. Again, what's not acceptable is if you're offering a draw in a losing position or if it's repeated, that type of thing. And I know, if I'm having if I have an even position against a lower rated player and they offer a draw, I don't get upset. Okay. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, I sometimes make the mistake of not accepting it when I should. Okay. But that's where ego comes in. You have to know when you're not having the best night. You have to know that, okay, you're about to enter some time pressure and you don't play well in time pressure. So why are you going to decline a draw when statistically every time you go into time pressure, you're going to lose because we think, oh, well, this time's going to be different. Again, the ego really gets in the way. Now let's talk about slumps, of which I'm going through myself right now. Okay. We're talking about ego. I'm putting mine aside. My peak rating was 1885 about a couple of years ago. I'm being lazy, right? I didn't pull up the exact date on the computer, but that's okay. I know it was 1885 and I'm down about 200 points from that, maybe a little less or more, which I fully admit. And when you're in a slump, so the question is, how do you deal with that? Okay. And, I always joke rating is like the reverse of weight loss. Like it's very easy to gain weight, but it's harder to lose it. But for rating, it's very easy to lose points, but it's harder to gain them. All right. So that's my analogy for the day. But, you get the idea. Like if you have a bad outing and you lose, let's say 30 points or even 50 points. And I was speaking to a friend about this about a year ago. I remember this conversation. The thing is, you're not getting that back in the same tournament. That's very rare, or probably not even in the next tournament. You may have to play another 2 or 3 events, depending on, if you get your groove back to get that back. But let's say it's a 5-round tournament. Let's say you're having a really bad start, and after the 3rd round, you're already down 30 points. You're not getting that back in that tournament. It's not going to happen. Okay. Because if you're not doing well, your pairings are going to be against someone rated lower. So anyway, with slumps, the thinking is, do you take a break? Do you just walk away from it? Or do you play through it? And I think it depends really on the person and your schedule. Now for me, I'm going to play through it because with my schedule, and I'm sure this is true for many of you, and my commitments, and, I'm dedicated to my career and everything, I know I'm always going to be busy. So if I say, let me take a break, I'll come back when I'm not busy, that's never going to happen because I'm always, it's like anything else in life. You just have to do it. There's never a good time. But depending on your schedule, you may want to step away from it. Maybe you want to step away from it for a month, maybe 2 months or more. Okay. So, it depends. I'm choosing to play through it, but I'm in a certain situation, which is that, I'm running the club that I play at. So if I don't play, I'm kind of just sitting there. So I'm already there anyway. So if you're not a TD, you might, it might be good to take a month off or so. It depends. But I don't think either one is necessarily the right answer. I don't think, yes, you should definitely take a break or you should definitely play through it. Maybe a little bit of both. Something to think about. I don't think it's a black or white thing. But I know that many players, they'll vanish after one bad outing. And I mean, you want to talk about a fragile ego. I've seen this happen all the time. My club elsewhere, they'll lose even one game. Like it'll be, say, a 2000 player who gets paired against like a 1300 player in the first round. And for whatever reason it happens, he'll lose or draw and they'll run. Like I won't see them for 6 months. That's happened. I'll get a message the next week. Like, I can't make it, something happened with my schedule. And again, I know the real reason, which is why. I mean, of course, it's not my business. I just say fine. As long as they tell me they're dropping out. But I've seen that happen. I've seen it happen in the major tournaments too. You're paying hundreds of dollars to enter these major tournaments, hotel fees and all that, entry fees, travel expenses. They'll play, 1, 2, or 3 rounds out of say 7, and they'll disappear. They'll just run. So, it's tough now, whether they're going to come back to another tournament the next month or whether it's longer, I don't know. But what I've seen at my club is, I mean, they'll, disappear for months at a time, which is interesting. And as far as rating, just some random thoughts here, for me, and I'm not going to get into excuses or a poor me thing, if I lose, I lose, but it is hard to play and direct and run the club. But again, I'm not saying that like poor me, that's my choice and I get it. But it can be very distracting. Okay. You're looking at a critical position and then, someone calls you over, it kind of throws off your train of thought. And then according to the USCF rules, I'm allowed to pause the clock to deal with TD business, but my opponent is allowed to look at the position. Okay, so he's basically getting extra time to study the board without the clock running. But again, that's that's my choice. So I'm never going to complain about that. I'm merely just stating the fact that, it is tough sometimes to do both. Okay. And then the other thing is, the rating system, you can argue, makes it harder to lose. It almost makes it snowball. So for example, when you lose and then you're sitting at a lower numbered board, that can affect your ego. And then the rating system in a way punishes you, when you lose, because then you usually get paired with someone with a lower rating, because if you lose a game, I know when I lose a game, it's like I would love to play a higher rated player immediately to kind of get it back, but it just doesn't work that way. That's why it's kind of a very slow, laborious process to get your rating up. And then if your score is really low, you have the possibility of, getting a full point bye. The way that works, if you have an odd number of players, obviously one person's not going to have a game. It goes by the lowest rated player in the lowest score group. So there's just a lot of things. But now I want to talk about ego. So for ego, I'm going to refer back to the book I mentioned earlier, The Survival Guide to Competitive Chess by John Ems. Okay. And again, I have no affiliation with Mr. Ems or the publisher, but there's some really, really good nuggets in this book about the correct mindset, because I believe, you could know all the theory and have a solid opening repertoire. You could have a decent positional understanding of the middle game. You could know all your basic end game stuffs, but if you don't have the right mindset, you're not going to see improvement. So I want to read you the table of contents and then just a couple of quotes from the book. You don't need to, as with most chess books, you don't need to look at every single position and every single move. Just a couple, but even if you just read the prose, you'll learn a lot just from that, and maybe just look at one or two key positions, because I know most of us don't have time to look at an entire chess book from cover to cover, every single position in there. I mean, that just requires an inordinate amount of time. So let's look at the table of contents first. So the first chapter is In the Heat of Battle. And some of the subsections are Something's Changed, Calculation, Check Every Move, High Reward and High Risk, Blumenfeld's Rule, avoiding high risk, low reward tactics. And there's a great quote, like in the beginning, I think it's from Larry Evans. It's something like, it's more important to, not do anything stupid than to like look for some brilliant tactical move or something like that. And then chapter 2 is called Winning, Losing, and Drawing, or Winning, Drawing, and Losing, I should say. Getting a result, last round nerves, converting winning positions. He talks about draws. I read you that quote before. Etiquette, dealing with bad positions. Then chapter 3 is all about clock control, the perils of time trouble, trying to avoid time trouble, keep it simple, stupid. We've all heard that saying. And then chapter 4, he shares his thoughts on opening play, on building a repertoire and guarding against complacency. Some really, really good nuggets. So let me just give you a couple of quotes now. Now, this first one goes directly to ego. All right. And it's called, the heading of this section on page 79 is called Grinding Out Endgame Wins. It's a great, great statement on handling lower rated players. And this is what he says. You may play as aggressively as Tal or Shurov, but on occasions, you'll still end up with boring technical positions. Sometimes they simply cannot be avoided, especially if your opponent is white and chooses to play in a certain way. Now, let me just throw in, I think at the amateur level, it really doesn't matter what color. You can get those boring technical positions. But anyway, let me continue reading the quote. So he says, if you're looking to beat a lower rated opponent from a quiet position, patience is important. You have to be prepared for the long haul. One thing that's worth remembering and repeating to yourself during a game is that a lower rated player may match your standard of play for many moves or even outplay you. But the odds are at some point a mistake will come, even if it is 20 or 30 moves down the line. And then you must be ready to pounce. Also, I don't think you need to fear going into endgames, which you suspect with best play should end up as a draw. This is simply because best play is one thing that can never be counted upon. Furthermore, when you study endgames, you soon realize that in many positions, there is a lot more going on than you would first imagine, and still plenty of scope to outplay your opponent. The following game qualifies as a typical endgame grind. And then he gives an example. But I think that's a fascinating statement about playing a lower rated player. Now, what I would add in is, that's easier said than done. And to go back to the draw offers earlier, if your lower rated opponent is simply playing like a machine, I mean, if he or she is just not making mistakes, offers you a draw and you're in a bit of time trouble, not taking the draw could hurt you, because that's what really kills your rating. When you start drawing and losing games to lower rated players, like for example, for myself, I'm not patting myself on the back, but I've, beaten experts. I drew an IM. I've done well against 1900 players. So people ask me, why isn't your rating higher? Or, once, not lately because of the slump I'm in, but when I was, before I hit this slump, why isn't your rating higher? And my response was simple: inconsistency. I was losing or drawing too many games to lower rated players. And that just destroys all the good work you did. So let's say it's a 5-round tournament. Let's say I draw an expert in the first round, and then maybe I beat a 1700 in the second round. And then let's say I'm paired with a lower rated player, like a 1400 who's doing really well in the third round. And let's say I lose that game. Well, all the rating points I just gained from the first 2 rounds, that's now like gone. Or maybe now instead of 30 points, maybe now it's like 7 or something like that. But that's another thing too. It seems when there's a loss that's a bit of an anomaly, that it's very punitive. Like there was an expert at my club rated 2000, always does well. He had one fluke night where he lost to like a 14 or 1500, lost like, I don't know, whatever it is, 20, 25, 30 points. And he said to me, that just doesn't seem right. Like just you have one bad night that you're losing that many points. I agree. I'm not going to get into the mathematics of the rating system because I honestly don't understand it, and I'm not going to pretend that I do. But, it's something to think about. And, a lot of these players now come into the club, they're playing online, they're playing a lot, and, they're actually doing pretty well. So I think you can make an argument that it's harder to get your rating up nowadays. But anyway, we're at about close to 25 minutes, a little bit longer than I usually go, but that's okay. This was a good discussion. But the book, again, I was referring to is The Survival Guide to Competitive Chess by John Ems. So just wanted to go over some things about draw offers, to share my thoughts, some thoughts about slumps, of which I'm, going through one myself, and I'm confident I'll work my way out of it. And the role of ego. It has a big role in the game and whether we make good decisions or bad ones. So as always, I appreciate you listening. I hope you win your next game.